From Notre Dame, two-time Super Bowl MVP, quarterback number 16, Joe Montana.
This man right here is Joe Montana, and according to some, he's the greatest quarterback in the history of the National Football League. He was the architect of the San Francisco 49ers dynasty of the 1980s, and just about any accolade you can think of, he's won. He won 4 Super Bowls, which was the record for the most wins by a quarterback in the Super Bowl before Tom Brady came along and set what might be an unbreakable record. Move over Bradshaw and Montana, Brady blew you out of the water. He led the league in completion percentage 5 times and led the league in touchdown passes twice. He was named an MVP of the league twice, was named a Super Bowl MVP 3 times, was named an AP First Team All-Pro 3 times, and was inducted into the Hall of Fame on the first ballot in one of the easiest decisions that the Hall of Fame committee will ever have. And part of why Montana is regarded as such a legend is because of how good he was in the postseason. He was great in the regular season, but he was even better in the playoffs. In the 4 Super Bowls that Montana played in, he didn't throw a single interception, throwing 11 touchdowns while doing so. During the 1989 postseason, when the Niners eventually won Super Bowl 24, he had a stretch that we might never see again by a playoff quarterback, as over 3 games, he completed 78% of his passes with a 146.4 passer rating, 11 touchdowns, and no interceptions. To post a passer rating of 146, which is just 12 points off of a perfect rating, is incredible. To average that out over 3 games is an absurd stretch regardless of when it comes. To average that out over the playoffs, the man was Joe Cool for a reason. So what if Joe Montana just decided to scrap everything that made him good? What if Montana decided to switch up a winning formula and do something in the playoffs that he had never done before? I'll put it this way. Imagine if you're a really good basketball player, and you're still a really good basketball player, and every time you play without a sleeve. Now, you decide that this playoff game is a good time to play with a sleeve for the first time in your life. Not only would people question what you're doing, because why mess with a winning formula, but it would probably feel uncomfortable and unusual, and would feel as though your movement is being restricted. The timing would be way off. Well, for some reason, that's what Joe Montana decided to do in the wildcard round of the 1993 playoffs. As in the first round against the Pittsburgh Steelers, he decided to play with the glove for the first time in his career. Spoiler alert, it did not go well. Not in the slightest bit. And this is the story behind one of the dumbest moments of Joe Montana's career, and one of the strangest adjustments and unnecessary adjustments made by any quarterback in a playoff game ever. Before I get into it, make sure you hit that like button down below, subscribe, hype up that video, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single video that we post on the channel, because we post every single day on here about the weird and the wacky history of the NFL with stories like this one that you may not have heard of before. So if you like that sort of stuff, then this is definitely the place for you. Thanks in advance for liking and subscribing, and for hyping up the video, and for helping us grow this community. And with that in mind, let's talk about the time that, for Joe Montana, the gloves came on. But before I get to that, we need some context to understand the importance of the game at hand, as well as the weather changes that led Montana to try something different. It's January 8th, 1994, and we head to Arrowhead Stadium for this wildcard battle between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Kansas City Chiefs. This was why the Chiefs got Joe Montana in the offseason, for moments like this. Since winning Super Bowl IV, the Chiefs had won just 1 playoff game in franchise history, and after being in this spot 1 year ago and losing in a 17-0 shutout to the San Diego Chargers, with poor quarterback play in that game and across the 1992 season, the Chiefs got one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time so that they could try getting over the hump and advanced to the divisional round for just the second time since 1972. Either that, or they were going to lose in the wildcard round for the third time in the last 4 years, and give Steelers head coach Bill Cowher his first ever win in the postseason. And this time, the Chiefs had this man right here at their disposal. Montana was still one of the best quarterbacks in football in 1993 by most metrics, and made it to the Pro Bowl for a reason. In the 11 games that Montana started that season, the Chiefs went 8-3, and considering the fact that Montana had the 5th best passer rating in the league and the 2nd best passer rating in the AFC, only behind John Elway, it's not hard to see why the Chiefs were winning games with him under center. It's not like the 49ers made a mistake, seeing as Steve Young was the undisputed best quarterback in football and was a first-team All-Pro who finished second in the MVP voting. But the Chiefs got a darn good quarterback on their hands. Montana started the season off strong with a game against the Buccaneers on opening day with 3 touchdowns and no interceptions, and it kept that momentum going throughout the entire season, with the opening game being a sign of things to come for that 1993 campaign. However, this game against the Steelers was a little bit different than other games, and not just because it was a playoff game. The difference? It was going to be cold. Like, really cold. Montana had played in cold weather before, so this wasn't anything new to him. The man grew up in Pennsylvania and went to college at Notre Dame. It's not like the man was playing in Florida his whole life before going to Kansas City. And even the final few regular season games that Montana had in 1993 were in cold weather, with the regular season finale against the Seahawks being in 25-degree wind chill, and the penultimate home game against the Chargers being in 27-degree wind chill. For the record, in both of those games, the Chiefs won, and Montana played well, so it's not like the Chiefs couldn't move the ball down the field offensively and they were having to get on in spite of Montana's anemic play. The man had played in the elements before and had played quite well. Heck, one of Montana's best games ever came in cold weather, when he had to go to Chicago to take on the Bears in the 1988 NFC Championship for a spot at Super Bowl 23. And he led the 49ers to a 28-3 win in 2-degree wind chill by throwing for 288 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and posting a passer rating of 136. The man could play in cold weather, but for whatever reason, Montana felt like this game against the Steelers in 9-degree wind chill was going to be different. Again, I can't explain it. It'd be one thing if it was truly the coldest game he'd ever played, or this was such a drastic difference from previous games, like the Chargers going from the Epic in Miami in 80-degree weather to the Freezer Bowl of the AFC Championship in Cincinnati. This wasn't that though, but because it was super cold, Montana had an idea. Why not throw with gloves on? The purpose of gloves is to keep your hand warm. If you've ever lived in the North, or any part of the country that gets cold, or any part of the world that gets cold, you've likely owned a pair of gloves at some point to protect your hands. The pro with gloves is that your hands aren't as cold. They're not as exposed to the elements. The con with gloves is that, depending on what kind of gloves you wear, you have less control over the objects that you touch, and mainly, that you're not going to have as strong of a grip. This is a player-by-player and a case-by-case basis. Some people like playing with gloves, while others hate the feel of them. You might golf and wear gloves, or you might golf and hate the idea of playing with gloves because it's just too slippery and you can't feel the club as well. Montana thought that it was a good idea to play with gloves on, and okay, that's his choice. The problem? Joe Montana had never, not once, worn gloves in his career. The greatest quarterback in the history of the sport was going to play with gloves on for literally the first time ever, and was going to do it in a playoff game with no prior experience. Going back to that golf comparison I made a couple of moments ago, imagine a golfer who had never worn gloves before deciding that the first time he was ever going to wear gloves would be on the first tee box of Augusta National for the Masters. Probably not the smartest move to mess up a winning formula and do something that you had never done before, especially if you had done it well in conditions way worse than this. But that was what Joe Montana decided to do here. Despite playing in 178 regular season games before this without wearing gloves, plus an additional 19 playoff games before this without wearing gloves, plus however many college and high school games he played without wearing gloves, Joe Montana was about to put on gloves and quarterback for the first time at 37 years old in a playoff game against a top 3 defense in the NFL in yards allowed. Seriously.
But Montana, they told me, has always had a problem throwing in cold weather. But guess what? Montana, for the first time in his career, is wearing a glove just like this. He tried it for the first time yesterday. I caught passes from him today. He gets great rotation. For a few seconds today, he tried throwing without the glove on the hand. He put it back on. So watch him today. I think he's going to have a good one just throwing the football because he's now confident in how he can grip the football.
And look, Joe Montana is a legend. But to the shock of absolutely no one, this did not work out. Especially when you realize that this was January of 1994 that we were talking about. And more than 30 years ago, gloves were not what they are today. Montana was essentially being asked to change the way he threw a football and gripped a football. Montana had felt a football thousands upon thousands of times in his career. And now he had to feel a football in an entirely different manner. And he was completely unable to do it. Montana wore a glove for the first 2 drives. On those drives, the Chiefs scored no points and had to punt it away twice. And on those drives, Joe Montana went 0 for 5. He couldn't hit water if he was standing on the dock. His passer rating after the first 2 drives was 39.6, which makes sense because in essence, he was spiking the ball into the ground on every single play. Nothing was working. He was missing wide open guys. He was making throws that no NFL quarterback should be making, and that's not a good thing. Something seemed to look off and feel off. As Montana sat on the gloves, I wish I could blame my start on the gloves, but that wasn't it. But I probably won't wear them again. Translation, I'm not going to blame the equipment, especially when it was something I chose to wear. But this was probably a bad idea on my end to try this for the first time at 37 years old in a playoff game. Which raises the question, how did the Chiefs win? The Chiefs won the game 27-24 in overtime, so if Joe Montana wore the gloves and he absolutely sucked with them on, then how, after the first 2 drives, did Montana guide his team to victory? Because he played quite well this game, and the reason why is because he realized this wasn't working and he needed to just play football the way he had always played it, which was without any gloves. And once he took the gloves off, as you can tell, he looked composed and sharp and looked like Joe Cool. With the gloves on, Montana was 0 for 5 with a passer rating of 39.6. With the gloves off, playing it like he played every other game, Montana was 28 for 38, completing 74% of his passes for 276 yards, 1 touchdown, no interceptions, and a passer rating of 102.5, at a time when the average passer rating across the NFL was below 77, and at a time when the number 1 average passer rating in the league was Steve Young's rating of 101.5. With the gloves on, Joe Montana looked like a guy who had never thrown a football before. With the gloves off, Joe Montana looked like Joe Montana. For some more perspective, over the previous 5 games, the Steelers' pass defense was a force to be reckoned with, as the average passer rating given up by the Steelers in that stretch was 62.3. Montana without the gloves in 9-degree wind chill was roughly 40 points higher than that. Makes you wonder why he didn't just go gloveless to begin with. All these years later, the Joe Montana story during the wildcard game between his Chiefs and the opposing Steelers serves as a reminder that you shouldn't mess up a winning formula. If it ain't broke, why fix it? If you've thrown without a glove your entire life, you're the best quarterback to ever play this sport, and the conditions on the field are really no different than the conditions you've grown accustomed to your entire playing career, then why do something different? Why change just for the sake of change? As much of a mistake as this was by Montana, to his credit, he wasn't stubborn and recognized quickly that this wasn't working out and went back to the old way of doing things. Stubborn quarterbacks may have tried to force the gloves to work, but Montana had an idea and quickly scrapped it once he realized it was not going according to plan. It is crazy to think about what happens, though, if Montana kept the gloves on. Do the Steelers win the game? If they do, what happens with the Houston Oilers in the divisional round? Do the Oilers end up moving as a result to Tennessee? The butterfly effect, all stemming from a pair of gloves, is fascinating. But on this January day in 1994, Joe Montana tried and learned a very important lesson. If the glove don't fit, you must dump it. If the glove don't land, you must play with your bare hands. Check out our live streaming schedule for the next few days. We're live every single day on this channel, whether we're covering a sporting event or playing GeoGuessr or just taking your requests. So make sure you like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss a single time that we go live and so that you can join this community. Also, thanks to all our members and our Patreon supporters who get exclusive perks like their name of the end of each video, members-only Q&A streams, and cool emojis to use on videos and during streams. See how you can join this community and become a member or a Patreon member by clicking the link in the description below.